All right, let's dive into a legal code that's thousands of years old. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Ancient rules sounds a little dry, right? But what if I told you this wasn't just a list of thou shalt nots? What if it's actually a fascinating blueprint for building an entire society from the ground up? So, this is what we're working with, the text of Exodus, chapter 22. It lays out laws for pretty much everything you can imagine, from what happens if your ox wanders off to how you should treat the poorest person in your village. It's like a window looking straight into a world trying to figure out what justice even means. Which really makes you think, doesn't it? I mean, if you had to start a society today, from scratch, where would you even begin? What are the most important rules? What values come first? Well, this ancient text gives us one really powerful answer. Because these laws aren't just random. Think of them like an interconnected system, a machine where every gear and lever has a purpose. And by looking at how it all works together, we can see exactly what the society cared about most. Property, yeah, but also personal responsibility, justice, and the very fabric of their community. So that's our goal here. We're going to look past the specific punishments and try to understand the principles, the why behind it all. We're basically uncovering the framework they created for a just and orderly life. First up, let's tackle something we can all understand: property, and what happens when someone steals it. These are really the foundational laws dealing with the tangible, everyday stuff of an agricultural world. And the core concept here is this idea of restitution. The main goal isn't just to punish the wrongdoer, it's to restore the victim, to make them whole again. And that is a huge difference from a system that's only focused on revenge or retribution. So, for example, the text says that if you steal an ox and then you slaughter or sell it, you don't just give one ox back. You have to pay back 5 oxen, a 5-fold penalty. But here's where it gets interesting. For a stolen sheep, the penalty is only 4 times the value. So why the difference? Well, it's actually brilliant. An ox was like their tractor. It was essential for farming. Losing it could destroy a family's livelihood. A sheep, while valuable, wasn't on the same level. The punishment reflects the economic impact of the crime. And you can see how this all has its own internal logic. If a thief is caught red-handed with the animal still alive, the damage is less severe, so they only pay double. But if they've already sold it, escalating the crime, the penalty jumps way up. If they can't pay, they have to work to pay off the debt. And notice that bit about a nighttime break-in. In the dark, it was considered a life-threatening attack, so defending yourself was justified. It's a remarkably nuanced system. Okay, so we've covered direct theft, but what about when your actions or even your property indirectly cause harm to someone else? Let's move on to liability. This code makes a really clear distinction between an unavoidable accident and just being negligent. So if a wild animal attacks livestock you're watching and you can prove it, you're not held responsible. That's an accident. But if your own animal wanders off and ruins your neighbor's field because you didn't secure it, well, that's on you, and you have to pay them back from the best part of your own field, not the worst. The logic gets even more specific when it comes to borrowed property. Let's say you borrow an animal and it gets hurt. The whole case comes down to one simple question: was the owner there when it happened? If the owner was present, the law basically assumes they accepted the risk and were supervising their property, so no payment is needed. But if the owner was away, the borrower had sole responsibility and they have to pay in full. It's a really clear line of liability. All right, we've talked a lot about property. Now we're going to shift gears and talk about people. This, I think, is where you really see the ethical soul of this legal code. This is where we see their moral commitments in action. And this one quote says it all. It commands them not to oppress a foreigner, but it's the reason that's so powerful. For ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. It's telling them, remember what it felt like to be vulnerable and alone. Now, make sure you don't inflict that feeling on someone else. It's justice rooted in empathy and shared memory. And this principle becomes the basis for a whole social safety net. The code explicitly protects those without power in that society: widows, orphans, and strangers. And it also sets up economic protections for the poor that were, frankly, pretty radical for the ancient world. A perfect example is the rule against usury. Now, in this context, that doesn't just mean ridiculously high interest. Verse 25 forbids charging any interest on a loan made to a fellow member of the community who's in need. The whole point is to help your neighbors survive, not to profit from their hardship. And this is just incredible. It explains that if you take a poor man's cloak as collateral for a loan,
You have to give it back to him by sunset. And why? The text asks this incredibly human question. Wherein shall he sleep? I mean, that's his blanket, his only protection from the cold. The law forces the lender to see the actual human being behind the debt.
So for our last section, let's look at the laws that define the community's identity. These are the rules that draw the boundaries and really answer the question of what it means to belong. So there were certain acts that were absolutely forbidden, and many of them carried the death penalty. We're talking about things like sorcery, certain sexual acts, and sacrificing to other gods. These served as non-negotiable cultural and religious lines that helped them forge a unique identity, completely separate from the cultures around them. So you see, to be part of this community, you had to adhere to these core beliefs. It was about way more than just individual behavior. It was about protecting the integrity and the shared identity of the entire group. So in the end, what we've seen is that a legal code like this one is really a mirror. It reflects a society's deepest priorities, what it values, what it fears, and what it hopes to become. And in this reflection, we see a community that prioritized fairness, personal responsibility, and a profound duty to care for the vulnerable. And that kind of leaves us with a final question for ourselves, doesn't it? If someone 3,000 years from now were to dig up our legal codes, our regulations, our social rules, what would they conclude about us? What would our blueprint for society say about our deepest priorities?